So in the last slide, we looked at this picture of an office and learned about a study where participants were asked to just wait in an office, and then later on were given a memory test about the items that they may have seen in the office. And several participants recalled seeing books and other items typical of an office, even though those items had not actually been present. So let's start thinking about what is causing these different kinds of memory errors. People remembering books or other types of things that you would normally see in an office but aren't actually there. People remembering seeing footage of a plane crash that didn't exist. So there are a lot of these sort of memory errors that make us want to then better understand memory and see why they are happening. One important factor seems to be that when we recall something, we seem to reconstruct it for ourselves. So remembering something is really more like recreating the event again in our minds. So it's a reconstruction of the past. Memory reconstruction involves an alteration of a memory, often to provide a consistent view of the world, and brain research suggests that memories are reconsolidated each time that they are remembered. So every time you remember something, you are reconstructing it, which means that the more often you remember something and tell a story about something that happened to you, the more likely that that memory starts to incorporate reconstruction errors. Here's a classic study about how people reconstructed something they read in a way that fit their worldview and their expectations. In 1932, Sir Frederick C. Bartlett asked people in Great Britain to read an unfamiliar story called War of the Ghosts. It was a folktale of the Kwakwala-speaking people of Vancouver Island. At different times after this initial reading, from less than an hour to years later, Bartlett asked the participants to recall the story. When Bartlett tested his participants, he discovered two things. First, even very soon after people read the story, their recollections were not verbatim recollections of the story, but they reflected their cultural biases and interpretations. The second finding was that the participants' memories for the story changed over time. The retellings of the story became shorter, leaving out the folktale's supernatural components and ambiguities. The order in which the participants recalled the events was in keeping with the British experiences of cause and effect better also. Pause this recording while you read The War of the Ghosts and an example of how the story was remembered. Now we're going to do a demonstration. I'm going to read to you a list of words. Just listen to the words, but please don't write them down. Thread, hurt, thorn, point, knitting, thimble, cloth, sewing, haystack, sharp, injection, pin, syringe, eye, prick. Now think of your age and triple it. Now divide that by 2. Now double that number. Double it again. Now stop doing the math and write down as many words from the list as you can recall. Okay, so stop writing. Did you recall the word thread? How about sewing? How about prick? How about needle? If you remembered the word thread, that's common because that was the first word on the list, and that's an example. It's called a primacy effect. If you remembered prick, that would have been an example of a recency effect. We tend to remember the last item on the list more easily because it was most recently read. Sewing was in the middle. You may or may not have remembered that one. How about needle? If you remembered needle, here's the point of this demonstration. Needle is not on the list, and yet when we do this activity in class, about 2/3 of the class will falsely remember the word needle. Why do you think that this effect happens. Think about how related the words on this list were. They were all related to the concept of sewing, to sharp objects, and it was almost like the only sharp object that was not in the list is the word needle. The concept of a schema can be helpful when thinking about memory. A schema refers to knowledge that describes what is typical in a given situation. What does your schema for a college class include? How about your schema for going out to dinner at a fast food restaurant? Did the list of words from the procedure from the last slide activate a schema in your mind? So I'm going to go back to the slide with the memory demonstration, and we'll see that it's called the Dees-Rodiger-McDermott procedure, or the DRM procedure. So that's just the name given to the list of words that are all closely related. When we do this activity in the whole class, usually about 2/3 of the class will falsely remember what's called the target word. So that's the word that's closely associated with all the other words but was not actually on the list. So can you see how if the list activated a schema, it might lead you to falsely remember that particular item? We're now going to take a look at some very common types of memory errors. Then we'll learn about how to help keep our memories of events as accurate as possible. In one study, participants viewed a series of slides depicting a car accident. Some participants were asked how fast were the cars going when they hit each other, and others were asked how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other. The results are shown at the top. First, let's look at the top left. Notice that those who were asked how fast the cars were going when they smashed into each other reported faster speeds than when the verb was hit or contacted. So when the word was hit, they reported the estimated speed was 34 miles per hour, but if the verb was smashed, they reported the cars were going 40.8 miles per hour. Now look at the top right. When participants came back a week later, those who had heard smashed into were more likely to report having seen broken glass in the pictures compared to those who heard the word hit, even though there was no broken glass. Other studies have shown that people can be led to remember events that never happened. These are false autobiographical memories. In one example, family members were first interviewed to gather information about details related to going to a mall when a teenage participant was much younger. The researcher told the teen that they learned about the time the teen was a child and had gotten lost at the mall. The story included several details that were part of the teen's childhood experiences, like who they went to the mall with, which mall it was, what shoes they wore. About half of the participants falsely remembered being lost at the mall after this event and even added details to the false memory. Here are a variety of false memories that have been created in this way. Given how vulnerable memory is, how reliable would eyewitness memory to a crime be? Let's take a look. So we're going to first watch a crime happen. And now we'll watch the lineup.
This is a good one.
Now let's see. Who could it have been? I'm guessing 3. Oops. There are some tips for trying to avoid memory errors. One is to reduce the amount of time between the event and the recall. Also, a quicker recall usually leads to fewer reconstruction errors because the memory for the event is more detailed. Research shows the best way to help people recover lost memories is to provide retrieval cues. This is because at least some forgetting is the result of retrieval failure. The information is there, but it's just not connected to anything that's in the current environment to help it be retrieved. Can we have a way of knowing when a memory is true or not? Unfortunately, the answer is no. Research suggests that there's little relationship between our confidence in our memories and their accuracy. False memories can be just as emotional as memories for real events. One solution to this problem is to use a cognitive interview. This is detailed at the end of the chapter for you. Thanks.